Okay, welcome to Stampscaping 101. I just made this scene right here using the autumn imagery, but doing it in more of a kind of a springtime palette. Okay, using greens and blues and a little bit of pink, and using a lot of gel pen work for, little flowers on flowering branches, flowering grasses, and so forth. Had a little, I had a lot of fun working on this one. I haven't used the autumn imagery in a while, and in this video I'll show you how to put those images together, kind of in a stamp sketching format, and the final result was done here on a quarter page card, 4.25 by 5.5 inches, and just a really straightforward, quick scene here. I don't know, quick in relation to some of the other scenes I've done of late. So I stuck with a quarter page, but as you can see in a quarter page, you can get a lot of imagery in there, a lot of depth in terms of background, midground, foreground relationships, and a full lighting scheme in terms of the staging of your imagery. So anyways, I hope you enjoy the making of this card. If you choose to watch it in its entirety or just in portions, I'll try to timestamp the different stages in the description of this video, so you can just jump right into the points that you might be curious about watching. Okay, thanks again for tuning in, and once again, I hope you enjoy it. Okay, this video is going to be about a collection of autumn types of background imagery. But we're going to do them in more of a kind of spring spirit. A lot of greens, various shades of green, yellows, things like that. But first of all, I was thinking, a couple videos back, I was talking about doing some stamp sketching, and I thought I would kind of just do a couple compositions here to show you how these different elements come together. There's right and left, okay, and there's also a stamp called Autumn Brook, which can be used. That could go on that side. These two can go together. They can kind of match this way. And Autumn Bank left can go with this one right here, or it can also pair up on this side. Alright, so let's see how that's done. This is a half sheet of paper. You don't have to use large sheets, but I thought I would go into it here. Let's use the right and left side. If you want more sky, stamp it lower. If you want more water, stamp it higher. If you want to kind of go middle, and have like sky and water kind of roughly equal in terms of representation, then kind of go towards the middle of the page. Okay. So we have that. Let's try the left-hand side. No masking needed, but what I'll probably do is I'll probably overlap by about a 1/4 inch into the first impression. Okay. And be roughly like so. What I did now is I just kind of peeked under here, physically, to make sure that I'm overlapping that. I don't want a, big gap in between. Now, on this one right here, I could stamp the brook right down here somewhere to match on, but let's just go with another impression of the left-hand side, but let's continue this bank, off to the side here. I don't need to ink up the whole thing because it'll be going off the paper. But don't try to ink up just that exact amount right there, because sometimes you might miss and you'll have this big white space in there, okay? So ink up a little bit more than you think you'll need, okay? Same thing applies. Overlap your previous impression a little bit. We have that. Okay. Now if you want to, you can put another bank on the near side with something else. Like this little grassy. This is Sedge cluster small. What that does is kind of introduces that same grass type of formation that's found on the other side of the bank there. Okay, and continuing on with the stamp sketch, put in some little lily grass touches in here. I mean, I could, if I really wanted to, I could mask off this sedge cluster as I'm kind of, stamping this lily grass in there, but in this case I don't want to. I'm just doing kind of a sketch here. Okay. Continuing on, I can add some little reeds on this side if I want to. While this is kind of loose and free form, I wouldn't say that it's haphazard. I'm still kind of adhering to the principles of the larger objects in the foreground. We have midground, background. All this is just kind of getting a feel for it, getting a feel for what my composition might kind of be going towards, when I do my final piece here. If you want to, you can stamp some kind of little figure in there. Okay, there's a little, that one's the solo canoeist. Little fence here. Maybe not. I don't know, I could put that over there on the side. I don't know if I want to do that though. Why not, on kind of a flooded environment maybe. I could put this tree here maybe when the water level goes down. You have these trees growing in. When the water level comes back in, you get these trees kind of, that the roots kind of drown, so you have this kind of this dead wood on the side of the pond or lake. Perfect areas for fish to hide. Okay. I didn't put anything in the sky. I could do something like that. You can put some clouds or a sky figure, or just put in some streaks of color. That type of thing. But anyways, let's see. Quick composition, just took a couple minutes. Alright, now let's do something similar. Let's see what we can do on just a quarter size sheet of cardstock, okay? With large stamps like this, you don't always have to stamp out the whole thing. You can take advantage of a smaller section of it. Let's just go... you can do it this way. That'll pretty much fill in the entire space from left to right if you center it, but you can still do partial. Just go with something like that, on top of one another. You can reverse it around again, something like this. Alright? But let's try Autumn Brook. What do you say? I kind of like it just like that, you know, just covering the whole area, but let's just do a stamp sketch here so I can, you know, kind of demonstrate the interlocking aspect of it. You notice when I'm stamping out large stamps like that, I press in all regions. I go in 1, 2, 3 presses, and then I'm also pressing on the top and bottom, okay? Just to make sure I get a nice clean impression. These are wood mounted stamps, so I would do the same thing with the cling mounted or just the rubber only Tech and Peel type of temporary mounting technique. Okay, that was Autumn Brook. Let's go with the Autumn Bank left. Okay. Match up the shores roughly. And overlap a little bit, 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch or so. Again, no masking necessary. Okay. And, I don't know, let's put a little bit of, since I didn't use this last time. Now, I would do this in, you know, blues or I don't know, whatever kind of color scheme the scene was going to be. But in this case, it's just a stamp sketch, so I will do it in black. You could always do a monochromatic or something like that, but I'm not going to do that. I just did that on my previous video, so I want to get some good color in this scene. I didn't stamp in the foreground of grass. Certainly could have, but again, some kind of foreground. I tell you what, since I just used these two, let's go for something larger. And perhaps a little bit more bold. Let's go with this dead branch right here, kind of come in from the side. Okay. And I said dead branch, but looking at it, it would be certainly pretty interesting to put some kind of little blossom on it. So maybe it's not so much a dead branch, but it was a dormant one. And you can put some nice little, you know, flowers coming out of that. In fact, maybe, you know, see, that's what's good about kind of doing these little stamp sketches. I think I'm going to do that. I'll use that tree, you know, because I was talking about doing kind of a springtime type of scene. Alright, so that's that. Anyways, overlap a little bit. And your different imagery will blend together as a result. Okay, let's see. For this scene, I'm tempted to just go with a 1/4 page scene, but I really like the elongated look of that one. Let's go with let's go with a 1/4. Alright. I tortured people enough with a super long video on the last one, so it seems to be a trend. These videos are getting longer and longer, I feel. Okay, now, I just colored this up all black, alright? But I do have these Marvy pens. These ones are actually really old Marvy pens. I mean, they actually have a black barrel now, and colored tops, I think. And they've had those ones around for a very, very long time. Just comes to show you how long these types of pens will last you. Now this one right here, as you can see, is fairly dry. Now, I've shown this in other videos, but this is the Marvy number 4, and there also happens to be a Marvy number 4. Looking right here. Now that one's the light green. There's Marvy re-inkers for their pets. They call these Marvy matchables right here because this is a number 4 green, this is a number 4 pad, or pen. The colors that you do have a re-inker for, you can just throw some re-inker fluid right down that inker fluid container, holder, whatever, and it'll re-ink your pen. But in this case, okay, I do want this pen to be a little bit dry because when I apply this onto this stamp now, because it's a little bit dry, I believe it should be pulling some of that black off, okay? And that's what I kind of want here. I don't want this to be... I want this image to be fairly dark because I achieve most of my colors with the use of the color application process, as opposed to getting it all within the initial impression, okay? So, I just want this to be fairly bold, and there's my green. Sometimes I don't take off enough ink, so when I stamp it out it looks like it's all black, so I'll try to avoid that. This is the light green, it's the number 11. Now this is pulling off some ink onto my tip here, so what I'm doing right here is I'm just kind of rolling this right here, and it's removing the ink that has transferred from stamp to pen tip. Alright. These are some reflections down here of the trees, and what I'm doing is I'm making some of these treetops a little bit lighter with the light green up there. So, in that same spirit, with these reflections down here, I'm making some of the tips of these right down here the light green as well. And hopefully, we'll get a little bit of variation within the impression itself. And we'll just get a little bit more of a slightly richer, I don't know, maybe color scheme. Okay. Now, just for a little bit of variation, on this one right here, I stamped this image out on the left side of the paper, and I stamped the Autumn Bank left right here to carry that out. Let's do it on the opposite side, okay? Alright, so here's a little bit of variation in there. You can see those greens. Let's get this down here in the light a little bit more. So it's a little bit lighter. You get a little bit of variation right throughout there, but for the most part it's a nice bold dark image. Alright, now let's do the same thing. Okay, now I don't need too much of this colored. I'll probably need about, this much, okay? From there over. Okay, inked up. Add a little spattering of color throughout here. As you can see, I'm really not trying to stay anywhere really specific. I mean, if there was a cabin or something like, amongst a, a grouping of trees like that, then if I wanted the cabin to be brown or something, and I wanted the trees to be green, I wouldn't just go over everything. But, in a situation like this, you don't have to be too careful. Now, if you had kind of green foliage and typical autumn colors, then you might want to, keep some of the things a little bit separate. Maybe put some brown down, put some green here and there, put some orange here and there, or something like that. Alright. About a 1/4 inch in here, into this impression with this one. Don't be afraid to really get down, take a look under the stamp. If this was an acrylic block with a, dye, it might be a little bit easier to register that impression. But the Woodman stamps do have the indexing on top, so. Okay, I just used a little bit of it over there, so not very much at all. Alright, let's see. Let's go for a little bit of shoreline here. Tell you what, let's keep it a little bit more bold, okay? Let's go with black. And it's a very delicate image, there's not a lot of solids to it whatsoever. Okay, so, and this is a very small, I just put a little bit of it down there. Okay. Oops, I just smeared that right there. I think with these pens here, it really puddled up some ink, but that's not going to be any big deal. I just noticed it's really dark in my room here. I forgot to turn on the light for the overall room and just my desk, so I'm going to go turn those on. Alright, better. Let's go for that. I was going to say, let's go for this branch. Let's hold off on that. Let's add the foreground in here a little bit later, especially in result of that little smear down there. This image right in the background could be slightly wet. But I tell you what, let's go with I think I like that water texture down there. Let's add some of that. But let's go in a light blue. I have a feeling that when I get through with this light blue, which will be a salvia blue, number 60 in the Marvy range of colors, I have a feeling this light blue might not be dark enough. But I'll show you what to do about that if that ends up being the case, okay? Alright, so a little bit of shimmery texture. If you notice, I'm kind of leaving a little bit light in the middle there, especially if I put like little Canoeist in there or something like that. We have it lighter in here and darker out here because I put more impressions, so you can get darker just with impressions as well as tone. And then it ends up being kind of a framing device when you have it a little kind of darker on the outside edges. It's like a vignette. It's a vignette of texture here now. When you use something like this, I can go with a darker blue out here and stamp that out on the sides, which I might have to go with, depending on, which kind of direction this little card takes in the toning process, of course. All right. Let's see here. You know what? I typically go various shades of blue in blue areas. Let's do something different. I use this Memento London Fog just in the previous lesson YouTube video, and I really liked it. the Memento inks are a line of, in terms of consistency, they're fairly moist inks. Slippery and thick. Not moist. That was the wrong word. They're thicker inks, okay? So when you're using them on glossy cardstock, glossy cardstock is a coated paper, clay coated. Anyways, the Memento kind of slides on them really nicely and spreads. It gives you time to spread them out a little bit, okay? The Marby inks, even though that's smeared a little down there, they're a little bit thinner inks, so they penetrate the page a little bit quicker than, say, a thicker ink would. So it's a good one to start off with. Okay, you don't want to get a bunch of hard, shapes of whatever applicator you happen to be using. I'm using a color box stylus tool here. Okay. Now, I didn't want this scene to be too bright. I want it a little subdued, I want a different take on this springtime scene. Let's make it early morning, but let's have a little bit of a, fog or overcast to it. And when I say foggy or overcast, when it comes to color, colors are much more saturated and intense when it's not so bright out, like high noon or something like that, okay? On an overcast day or cloudy day, you get a lot more vibrancy in terms of the color's intensity. Now, when I say intense, I don't necessarily mean, and when I say bright, I don't necessarily mean lighter, in value. I just mean brighter in terms of intensity. The sun's not kind of just bleaching out all the colors of the different objects. Okay, I'm adding some of this gray into the scene. I'm kind of establishing a lighting scheme. Light, a little bit dark in here, darker. And a few objects, little tufts of grass here and there are going to be a little bit lighter, as is some of the water, okay? Now, I'm kind of taking this into a monochromatic look right here, but I will move into the greens for the trees, and I'll move into the blues up in the sky and water. But the very idea of having this common ground, hopefully, will act as kind of a binding not force, but well, I don't know, it'll act as a binder between the two different areas by having a common ground, okay? Otherwise, if you do kind of different color schemes within a different scene, if you have them completely separate, okay, just blue up here, green over here, blue down here, I believe it loses a lot of continuity when that happens. Everything seems a little bit kind of unrelated, but having common colors really helps to kind of tie things together. After all, I mean, when you're doing something like this, you want to create relationships between all things, so that they kind of tie together. And as far as like your sky and water. You know, water tends to reflect a lot of what's going on in the sky. And if the sky is kind of establishing kind of the lighting scheme or the color of the scene. You know, if this is a sunset scene, you know, you wouldn't see blue up here. You know, it'd be kind of a different hue and color scheme. Okay. Going into my water here. This is, if I didn't say it, this is the salvia blue. Okay, it's the same color that we used on the water pattern small stamp. Okay. So far, just two colors so far, as far as the background goes, and I think it's really starting to kind of establish a nice little mood in there. But I always like to take it a little bit farther. Okay, this is a light blue, the number 10 Marvy. Okay, it's really quite bright of a blue. It's kind of a medium value blue. Okay. Kind of when you start moving into these colors, if they're darker or very bright, kind of use them a little bit sparingly maybe in the beginning, you know, to get a feel for it. I mean, if I don't want things to be so intense, you know, up there, then by kind of moving in a little bit of a slower process, meaning I'm kind of staying on the outside here a little bit longer, see, before I take it in. It's just so much easier to control that way. And to kind of get down on the paper kind of something that's more pleasing to your eye, I think. You know, if you feel really comfortable with it, if your pad isn't too wet, you know, and it's kind of a medium dryness on there, you can kind of just get in there, but my pad right here is pretty juicy, so I have to kind of be careful with that. I mean, it's not precarious, it just means, you know, just stay on the outside a little bit and see how that color is affecting the overall look. Okay. I might go to an even darker blue, but for the right now, let's move into some of my brighter tone greens. Okay, let's start to bring those trees to life a little bit more. Okay, this is a yellow-green. You can use something similar if you don't have it. You can use even yellow if you want to, or something like that. Kind of a neutral yellow. Okay, kind of warming it up a little bit. You see what that's looking like here. It's fairly light and warm. Okay, it's going to flesh it in. I'm going to put that over everything and down in my grass as well, and back in here. These stamps are tonal in terms of having, you know, shadow and highlights kind of inherently in the designs themselves, right? But they don't have, you know, temperature and intensity, things like that, and that's where adding additional tone, color temperature to your stamped art, comes in. Saying that some people, doing these stamp sketches here, there are some people that use our stamps, and that's basically what they like doing. They just love composing things, and they just love doing them in black and white, which is certainly an option. And they don't tone in either. They just love to compose. Compose and build the scenes. There's something to kind of stamp sketching, a lot of what we do in rubber stamping or craft, and card making, there's a lot of, everything is, not everything, but a lot of things are quite deliberate, if you're constructing a certain type of card, and different folds, different pop-ups, things like that. I mean, these constructions, you have to get a quote into a specific area, it has to be a specific size, we're doing matte cuts and things like that. Anyways, what I'm getting at is sometimes there's less of a, kind of a spontaneity when it comes to something like that. But doing these stamped sketches or something like, that, I'm guessing, for those people that just like to compose and kind of build scenes and just a monochromatic touch, they might like just the element of spontaneity. It's not quite, say, calligraphy or something like that, or watercolor painting. But there is that element to it, of working fast and a little bit more free form. Yeah. Is it for me? Yeah, sometimes I like to do that. As you can see from these videos, a lot of things I like to do are kind of monochromatic. Although I do like color too. And one of the things I'm kind of moving towards is I want to work with these pens a little bit more that I just bought. A Sharpie paint pen. When I was thinking about doing this scene for tonight, part of the reason was so I get an opportunity to work with those pens. I want to do them in different colors, and that one has a pastel green in it, which I think will be really fun. Okay, working through, I use that number 52 yellow-green, and now I'm going into the number 11 light green. Light green is a very, very warm and intense, not quite day glow, but pretty close, hue. So be careful with it, use it as you please. Get the intensity to what you want. This is the number 4 green. It's the same green that I used in that pen form. It's fairly bright. It's this color green right here, okay? And as I apply it in here, it looks very, very bright. And it's kind of dark, but brightness is in terms of intensity. I'm not talking about value in terms of light and dark. I'm talking about bright here. For me, a little bit too bright. Okay. I'll fix that though. There's nothing that's wrong about this. I like having the intensity in here of that, but I want to just kind of mellow that color out a little bit. You know, that value of green. Most of the time I'm using my little tip like this. I'm using just a small little streak of it like that. I'm using it at an angle like that, okay? Not like this the whole time. That's too wide of a, you know, tip for me. Okay, that was the green. I haven't been changing brushes either. I should note I'm using the same tip. I switched when I went from blue to green, okay? That's the blue side, that's the green side. You know, as far as building up through all the greens, I'm using the same side, okay? Now, let's take some of that ink off, but let's keep some of that green on here, and let me go with my brown. This is always my kind of secret weapon with super bright tones, tones that I consider too bright. I just like to mellow things out a little bit by applying them in there. It's not going to read as brown, but it just gives a more mellowed out versions of those bright colors that I'm just trying to subdue. Brown, you know, of course has orange in it, and I think that looks good in there to have that type of tone. Okay, see, that's how bright it is out there, and that's where I've kind of run it over. Kind of starts taking it into, it oscillates, it kind of starts taking them into kind of a bright green to an olive green a little bit. It doesn't mean that I don't want any little pops of intensity in there, but I just don't want it to be everywhere like that. Okay? I've been putting it down here on this grass here in the foreground. Alright. So we're fleshing this in little by little. Let's move back to, let's go to blue. I'm looking at my table here. I was hoping I had my Prussian blue. I don't see my Prussian blue anywhere here. That would be a good one for the sky. Okay. My autumn imagery here, done in, you know, some fairly intense colors. The weight of it, okay, is getting kind of heavy visually, and it's removing it from the sky a little bit, so I want to bring in some of that intensity into the sky, just so that the land isn't kind of overwhelming it, okay? Same thing down here in the water. I am taking some of that blue and putting it over the green just to kind of blend it in a little bit. Okay. Kind of dragging it in. My tip is, it's pretty dry by the time I go on here. A lot, you know, several drags and taps, so that's when I'm kind of taking it into that lighter area. As I drag this in there, the sky is a little bit, it's grabbing this brush a little bit. What might be good is to go back to some Memento London Fog and add it in there. Not necessarily to change the look of it, but just to reintroduce that ink back in there, because my paper up there is fairly dry, so this Marvy ink, remember I said the Marvy ink's a little bit thinner? It's not pulling across as much as quickly or as smoothly as I like to have it. Okay, going in here with some of this blue. It's not going to read as blue, but I just want to use the value of it and intensity a little bit in here, just to introduce some of that blue in there. You know, another common color running through all the different areas. Okay. Let's go for a little bit of a change of hue. It's not really a change of temperature, but let's go. Pink is one of the colors that I've come to use a lot. I like how pink and green kind of look together, too. Now I have this little area up here of sky that's the white of the paper still. If you don't have that, then what this will look like is a little bit of lavender up there, which isn't bad, okay? Just a little bit of a different color. But that being said, what I'll do is I just applied bubblegum pink on here, and I'm going to apply it in a very dry brushed approach. I'm tapping it off a lot before I go on here. And it's slowly starting to introduce some of that color into the sky area. Okay, just like that. Could just leave it over here and put that little smear down here and supposed to, you know, instead of just doing it over the whole thing. Let's introduce that down here into my water as a reflection of that hue. Okay. Let's bring it up into, believe it or not, some of the trees. How about some of the land has a touch of that pinkish hue? In most of the areas where I'm applying this, it's more of a violet because I'm overlapping blue. Okay. So anyways, here we go. Okay. Sparingly, right? It's down here, a little bit over here too. And I've applied it over here too. Down here. Okay. What do you think? Maybe right here too, huh? Let's give it a try. Okay, looks pretty good. See that color of the sky is bringing some of that tone down here, so we have that kind of that visual dialogue of kind of a light source and the reflected light down here. Okay, so all these little bits on it here, I mean, it's just a tiny, tiny little element of that pink. I mean, it's going over the green and the brown, but just having that little bit there, you know, it creates that little relationship. Now there's that little area in there we can do it with. And I'm not doing this with just a fully inked, really super juicy tip right here. I mean, there's barely anything on here. See that right there? But that's kind of what we want, right? We don't want to kind of overwhelm it. Okay. Put it a little bit on that little bit back in there. All right. Okay. Let me see. I haven't forgotten about our foreground images. Maybe it's time to introduce those. Glare from my lamp. Okay, where's my dormant branch? It's called Spooky Branch, but let's have a little bit more of a prominent role for this branch than that little bit right there was, okay? Let's really bring it in. I want to get some of this bottom part too, okay? Okay, here it is right there. Let's do something else too. I think this scene can take... Remember what I said about, you know, just using portions of certain stamps for what you want, you know? I just use that little tip there again to bring that in right there. And let's have that branch coming in from the other side to kind of balance out that balance out the composition with a similar form texture on the right side. Okay. Something like that. It doesn't have to be as prominent. Okay. In fact, I think if I put something over here, it would be too redundant, you know, from the left and right hand side. So let's just leave that as is right there. How about some reeds? Okay. Let's say that there's some grass kind of growing on the left and right hand side of the composition. Foreground added down there, right? By having all that black down there, I think I want to, I always do this, seems like, tip the edges, okay? Go with a little bit of black on the left and right. A lot of times it's on the bottom as well, but I'm not going to touch that because those images on the bottom right now are really wet. It's because I inked up, you know, I put so much ink down here on the paper so that stamping out a fresh, you know, nice, juicy, dark impressions up there. Those take a little bit longer to set up than stamping them onto a dry piece of cardstock, okay? So give it a little bit of time to dry. I mean, it's not going to take forever, but I don't want to take this and start dabbing it down there. It's going to smear everything. Okay. All right, a little bit better, I think. What do you think? Okay, kind of contain the composition a little bit more too. Do we want to put that little solo canoeist in here? Yeah, why not? Okay. Alright, kind of added a nice little focal point. Okay, I can't wait to start adding in some little details into this scene. I love doing the details. For me, it's my favorite part, I think, of a scene to do. Alright, now let's try something with the these are Sharpie paint pens. Relatively new, you know, at the time of the making of this video. They're water-based. I think there might be some oil-based ones too. It's kind of nice that all these like Sharpie and things like that, traditional office supply types of you know, manufacturers are kind of getting into the crafting side of these. I mean, how many different colors of Sharpie are there these days? And multiple tips and, you know, incarnations, you know, clicky tip ones and whatnot. Okay, let's see here. That paint there is of a certain value, okay, in terms of light to dark. I have to kind of get a feel for where it's going to show up in here, okay? Sometimes having all kind of white little dots, it's too much. It's, you know, it depends, you know, if you're kind of doing these little highlights in a darker area, like over here, sometimes white stands out a little bit too much. So anyways, see where I'm kind of adding that in there? That area in there, I mean, it's fairly rich, but, you know, instant contrast when you go and add like little dots of color, which represent dots of highlights. Okay. Now, if I added this pen in some areas that are fairly light, what you'd have is a dark dot, right? Because just everything's relative. So it wouldn't really be so much of a highlight. It would be, you know, something else. It would be darker. Maybe it's just a texture or something like that, or, you know, color on a leaf or something. Okay, remember this is kind of spring, and you have these new leaves reflecting their color onto the environment. I added some down in that area. You can see it throughout, those little dots, like around there and throughout here. See what it looks like a little bit at arm's distance. Okay. I just remembered this tree. I might want to add that in there. Sometimes I like things kind of, you know, an element of crisp, you know, sharp amongst an area that's kind of soft. And this area in here receives so much tone that we've lost some of the elements of, you know, the kind of the crisp, you know, shapes and forms within there. So, I mean, it's all there, but it's just kind of subdued. But sometimes going in here, like somewhere in here, and be it a branch or something like that coming out of the bushes, or anything like this. This is just a way to go back in and add that kind of crisp element back into kind of an otherwise fairly soft background or surrounding area. So I'm masking off some of the grass down there, and I'm going to have that kind of popping out of there like that. See that right there? Okay, there it is right there. Could use one right over here too. See that where that area in there gets a little bit muddled? Well, you can use that to your advantage. It's not a weakness, okay? It's like in photography or something like that, you know, in landscape photography they often shoot for, you know, maximum depth of field. But sometimes things in the background can get a little bit blurry. I don't know, sometimes on purpose, more so in portrait photography. But anyways, you can represent near by having a crisp element, and far can be a little bit more diffused. Okay, good. See that right there? We have two of these dead branches. Not uncommon for the area around a shoreline. Okay. Alright, now I have to kind of watch out for those too. They could be dead, or like I said, I could put some blossoms coming out of them or something like that. But okay, that's the green. Now let's go into something a little bit more possibly exciting. Let's go into some color. Let's go into how about a bunch of little wildflowers, spring wildflowers, you know, amongst the grasses. This one's a white paint pen. Let me see if I can get down here a little bit closer. Okay, bringing it to life a little bit. Kind of have this card on its side here. It's kind of easier for me to get to that like that, but also this, doing this video, the camera is right in front of my face. Okay. See that right in the background there? See those little, I guess it's like, oops, it's like a blooming grass, right? Seeding grass. Okay, how about down here? Okay. Alright. It's right side up so you can see what's kind of going on. Really, I mean, it really brought a lot of that area to life. Some of the little details are here. Down next to the water side, I have these little rocks. Let's add a little bit of some highlights on some of that. Okay. And tempted to do it in the background there, but why don't we go with let me try something here. This is a blue. light blue. So let me go for a little bit of texture back there, but it won't be so bright. If I didn't have these pens, you know, the different colors, I would just use white. But since I have them, might as well use them if it will kind of improve the potential. I'm using it down here in the water a little bit, just so it won't, instead of doing a white dot, I'm just doing a little bit of blue to kind of bring out that water a little bit, but a little bit more of a subtle fashion here. Okay. Go so far. Now, let's go to this branch right here. It looks okay. It's not really playing a big role. Well, in terms of depth it is, but in terms of like kind of a vital role in the you know, the greater scheme of things. I tell you what, let me do. Well, let's go with this one right here. Let's make these little branches. Yeah, I have these little blossoms on them. Okay. Doing it in pink. Relates to the sky. Adding that in there, it's becoming a much more prominent player in terms of an object. I could be much more subtle about this and just add a few of these, but I want to make this fairly prominent. Okay. Okay, there we go. Right. Let's put a few more down here. I'm kind of clustering these little flower, little dots together a little bit more. Okay, let me put, I'm going to put a few of those little pink dots here and there, as though, like some, those little flowers have fallen off. Okay, now I have that other branch, spooky branch coming in from the other side, so it wants to have a few little blossoms as well, so let's add it in there. It's kind of a little bit more subdued because it's in that cluster of grasses that are growing in front of it right there, but nevertheless, here we go. Oh boy. Okay, I'm trying to think of if I want to put some on these trees right in here. Let me do a couple. Let's say it's going to be really quite subtle because it's in the background there. Let me see if I can get that to focus. Okay. You see those right there? Where it's pink right in here? Let's do that on this tree as well. These little scenes like this when we're stamping it out. It kind of provides like a little bit of a kind of imaginary escape. Like when I'm doing this right now, I kind of, I mean, this scene or, something similar, I just flashed in my brain. It'd be really kind of neat to be at kind of such a location like that. That's when you're doing these scenes or whatever. I think, especially with scenic stamping, it's kind of we stamp. I don't know. Some people might be doing something from memory, but this isn't from my memory. It would be the kind of place that I would certainly like to be at. To kick back, to take some pictures or photography or whatever, and just to kind of relax or really recharge in such a location. Okay, let's see here. Here's this tree right here. Let's bring that out a little bit more. Kind of brings it to life. I mean, it's not happening here. I mean, this is just a still scene, but you kind of get, kind of have this feeling. Let's literally do this to what I'm talking about here. But here's these little blossoms kind of falling off. The tree right here. I'm gonna add some in there like that. Is there fun? I got some ink on my fingernail. Let's have some of this pink just kind of here and there. It's almost as if a little breeze has come by and get these little petals, flower petals kind of floating down. Kind of giving a little bit of motion, or implied motion, maybe, I don't know. To the scene, like these things are falling off. Let me see if I can do something to it. No, I really don't think this is going to show, but maybe like a little detail here, like on some of these little dots up here. I'll try to highlight them, so on these little pink things, I'll try to make those capture a little bit more light by making them have a little bit of a highlight on them. It's one of those things I don't think anyone would really ever notice or whatnot, but I think it affects the overall feeling, the overall impression. Okay, now on this branch right here, that's kind of has these little blossoms on it. It's kind of like a cherry tree blossom or something. Why don't we I'll put a few little things of green on there, like, maybe, some leaves are starting to emerge on the branches, and by doing so, having that green on the branch, it kind of ties it in with the kind of the other colors, the main color scheme, the other trees and grasses within the scene. Okay, I think that's that. I kind of went crazy with the paint pen, but I don't know, that's what I do. Okay, color box, pigment ink, frost white. This scene can really use it. I mean, I like what's going on with all that gel pen highlighting work, but when I said I did go crazy with it, I knew it, but we can kind of subdue a lot of it too, and introduce yet another texture, as always, with this. But it's also really great to kind of subdue some of that, extreme gel pen work. And as always, with the gel pen, if you ever add in too much, you can always just kind of go and wait till your impressions kind of dry a little bit before you go in there. Like this black, you wouldn't want to rub some of those gel pen highlights out and smear anything, okay? But if things are dry, you can get right in there. Okay, see at the base of the tree, and a little mist on the far edge of the lake or pond. Okay, a little bit of mist down here where that tree transitions into the grass will be nice. Okay, this my pigment ink pad here is, it's not super moist, so I'm having a really easy time applying it. But if you have a really new pad with a lot of ink on it, pigment ink, kind of proceed with a little bit more caution or control. If it's really super juicy, there's going to be a lot of ink on here. Just dab it off a little bit before you start to apply it, okay? Okay, let's illuminate some of that background. Far end of the pond. Kind of right back in there is where that is. Oops, sorry. That right there, is that right in there? Near and far. Near and far. Alright. Don't do everything, okay? Well, I guess you could, but I think it's better to kind of oscillate it, back and forth between some mist and not. So you have the element of soft playing against hard, diffused against sharp, okay? And you're playing these contrasts against one another. Soft will look softer if you have an element of crisp next to it. And that crisp will look, a little bit sharper of an image by having something kind of soft next to it. So, you can kind of play around with those, that kind of dynamic. Okay. I'm dabbing some off. I remove just about as much ink as I apply with this pigment ink, because inevitably I just add too much. Okay, it doesn't look good, so I can just dab it off with my finger, no problem. If it dries on here, as far as the color box one goes, that's fine. Rub it off when it's dry. It'll come right off. It's not going to fall off. It'll, you have to apply some deliberate, application of force to it, you know, in rubbing fashion or whatever. You can take a Q-tip again, just, you know, clean one, and just rub it off if you want to. Okay. I was up in the, I don't know, I guess upstate New York area many, many years ago, teaching classes, and kind of haven't traveled in a while, but kind of towards the end of when I was giving workshops here and there, I started taking little day trips in between. I started scheduling days off in between some classes if I was teaching in, you know, several different cities, and was in Rome, New York, and it wasn't far to get into that Adirondack area, and so there's incredible lakes everywhere, but it was so cool. A lot of people in my class lived, you know, around these lakes, and they were talking about, you know, several, it seems like, I don't know, it just wasn't uncommon at all, or it was common just to have either a canoe or a kayak, and people talked about just doing that after they got home from work. And I thought, oh, wow. Wouldn't that be, you know, kind of fun and amazing, you know, to do that. Just, you know, pretty much any day of the week if you're doing it after work. Okay. Alright, let's put some around those treetops there, so we can turn those trees a little bit in space. What you're doing is you're taking a, you know, two-dimensional object and just kind of adding a little bit of a lighter element on one side of it, saying that that side is capturing that light, so you're saying kind of that object is a little bit more three-dimensional. And I'm doing it on the left-hand side of this cluster of trees on the trees. So we have light is coming from right here, and I've applied pigment ink here, 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 and here on the right-hand side of the trees. I just left them as is, so it looks like the light is coming from that side here, that way. Okay, a little bit of diffusion of, you know, form down here. Adding mist. See at the base of this canoe here? Not the whole thing's not just all toned out. I have some, like the Canoeist up top there, he's, you know, a little bit more crisp. Parts of the canoe still show through a little bit. Mist, right around here, right around the bank a little bit. See that tree there? It was just all black right here, having the trunk kind of transition into a lighter area. Doing a little bit of mist back here, makes that pop out a little bit more into the foreground. Sharp and crisp, distant and diffused. Let's play with that a little bit more, as a matter of fact. Let's add a little bit more down there. Sometimes this pigment ink, when it dries lighter. Okay. Alright, let me take that back. It dries darker, okay? So sometimes I just, you know, when it dries, I go back and add kind of a second coat, so to speak. Dab on a little bit more. And then when I spray this, it'll inevitably get darker too, so it isn't a bad idea to go in here. Sometimes this pigment ink, it almost starts to kind of, when it dries, if I want an area really light sometimes, I can't get it sometimes with the color box. So what I do is I do it first with the color box to get kind of a scheme that I want, and then I'll go with the Brilliance, which is a fast-drying pigment ink, and I'll dab that into that area. And I'll finish it off with some Brilliance ink, but I don't like using Brilliance ink right off the bat because, you know, I'd rather establish kind of that kind of texture gradually and with more control with an ink that's not going to dry so fast. So, all right, I think that looks good as far as the effects that I want. Let's go from left to right here in terms of the details. Okay, the tree kind of stands out a little bit more. You can see where I applied some of those little green leaves and pink blossoms to the branch. It's a fun little effect. It brought it to life. Okay, we have that mist kind of creeping around the far shore. And the little branch reiterates what's going on the other side. Pink little dots as pink is reflected in the sky, so it kind of creates a little bit of relationship between those two areas. And kind of the oscillation of greens with the use of kind of a pen application of it onto the image itself, and then following up with more tone added with the use of the smudging method. Okay, and also don't forget about the pinks back here. Okay, so a little bit of it back in here, right here. All right. So while these different areas are different in hue, we have blues, greens, blues, and greens. You bring in some kind of thing like that to tie the scene together. It's a common color, and also we put in that common color underneath all this. I really don't see any evidence of Memento London fog, you know, that gray that we put in there to begin with, but that kind of was a nice base coat to establish the lighting scheme and provided a common base color. So even with that gray in so many areas, you know, it's not as if it looks dull, okay, as a result of having that gray on the base. So some kind of, you know, base color on your scenes is often a good idea. And while you're doing it, use kind of a thicker one so that all these other colors spread nice and easy. Okay, so anyways, I will get this matted up and into some kind of card format. Maybe I'll see if I have a little bit of pink or something like that, or green, and get this card finished up. So anyways, a fun card to make, and that's how you use the autumn imagery, or one way. Okay, we can of course do it in autumn colors too. I'll do that in the future videos sometime. Alright, thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed the scene.